Hey guys, it's Cece, and today I am here to do my November wrap-up. So, it's already wrap-up time. November is already at its end. I don't actually know where November went. I feel like I say this at the beginning of every wrap-up, but I seriously don't know where November went. Just kind of, it doesn't exist anymore. But now it's Christmas, if you can't tell, based on my decor behind me. It's not like Christmas, but it's after Thanksgiving, and I call every day after Thanksgiving and up to December 25th Christmas. So it's Christmas for a month. Anyway, I read a grand total of 8 things in the month of November. That is 6 novels, 1 short story, and 1 graphic novel, and I'm going to talk about them now in the order in which I read them. So let's just jump into that. But before we jump into that, I just want to say I read every single book on my November TBR but 1, which never happens. I never actually achieve my TBR. I always change things. No, I read every book on my TBR except 1, which I have now started. So props to Cece. So the first thing that I read at the very beginning of November was Fear of Flying by Jong. As I've mentioned in other videos, this is a book that I'm using for my thesis. It follows a woman named Isadora Wing, and at the beginning she is on a plane full of analysts, one of which is her second husband, because they're going to some sort of conference. But when she gets to this conference, she meets this guy named Adrian Goodlove, and she runs away with him and kind of has an affair with him because she's supremely unhappy in her marriage. But the reason that this was such a big deal was because it was published in 1973, and it was a huge step forward as far as women's sexuality being portrayed on like a wider scale. It was also a big step forward for women representing their own sexuality, because Jong is a woman and she was writing about a lot of her own experiences, so I really respect it for that. But Isadora just made consistently like super bad decisions, and I don't understand a single person that she explained sleeping with over the course of this book. They were all disgusting men, and that's not just, you know, me speaking as a lesbian, that's me speaking as a human. None of these men sound remotely appealing. But I did have a lot of stuff that I'm going to talk about in my thesis, so I did get that much out of it. Clearly I got some interesting things. I wound up giving it about 3 out of 5 stars. So the next thing that I read in the month of November was All the Ugly and Wonderful Things by Bryn Greenwood. I borrowed this from a fellow intern at my internship. She read it and she said that I needed to read it, so I did. What a ride. What a ride. Basically, this book is historical fiction. It takes place mainly in the 70s, but it carries on for a few years, and it follows a main character named Wavy. She is from an abusive home, as well as the fact that her mother is a drug abuser, and Wavy is a very odd child because of this. She never speaks. She doesn't seem like she eats. She only eats when people aren't looking, and the story begins when she's about 8 years old. But overall, the story is about a romance. It's a supreme age difference. But let me explain why this book worked for me. Basically, Bryn Greenwood refused to take a stand either way on what was happening over the course of the book. It was told through numerous perspectives, not just Wavy and Killen, but also Wavy's aunt, her mother, the people around her, the people who knew Killen, her cousins. Everyone who was involved in the story got a chance to explain how they felt about the situation, and because of that, the author didn't really take a stance. She just offered every possible perspective and allowed you to draw your own conclusions. Like I said, this book does take place over a lot of time. Wavy does not stay 13, but that is where a bulk of the story takes place. So if this is going to make you really uncomfortable, I understand, but I really enjoyed how the story was told. The fact that it didn't take a stance, I thought that the writing was beautiful. My main issue with this is that I felt the ending was way too wrapped up in a bow, and I didn't really love that, but overall I thought this was really masterfully done, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. So the next book that I read was a book that I read for school, for my Gender and Globalization in Contemporary Anglophone Fiction class, and that is The Reluctant Fundamentalist by Mohsin Hamid. This is a post-9/11 novel, and it follows a Pakistani man, and it is a one-sided monologue beginning to end. Basically, this American man wanders into a restaurant in Lahore and this guy is sitting there and he starts telling his story, and you don't get interruptions, you don't get dialogue, it is just him telling his story. It is about him first moving to New York City when he's young, attending Princeton, getting an incredibly prestigious job, and then 9/11 happening and how that affects his life. The way this story was told was incredibly well done, in my opinion. You don't really need interjections from other people, but also it provides such a great route into an unreliable narrator. You only get to see how everyone else is portrayed through his eyes. That's it. I don't know how I felt about the ending. Again, it sort of left it open for interpretation, and that frustrated me. I wanted a little bit more of a wrap-up, but this had such interesting things to say about anger, and it was such a different perspective than a lot of other post 9/11 novels. So I wound up giving this one 3.5 stars, well written, characters that I found were well written, and overall it was a good book. Not my favorite, and I definitely didn't like the ending, but solid read. The next thing that I read was Axiom, The Last Hope by R.M. Pearcy. This is a YA dystopian. Basically, it follows our main character, Ella, and she lives on a paradise called Axiom where all of your decisions are made for you, and when you turn a certain age, you go to the school. The school is where you figure out what you're going to be doing for the rest of your life, and your spouse is chosen for you. It's like a preparation for adulthood on Axiom. But while she is there, she winds up falling in love with her very female roommate, which is not a thing on Axiom. And so it becomes about that, about her sort of rebelling and falling in love, and also realizing that the way Axiom works may not be perfect after all. I really enjoyed this book very, very immensely, mainly because my problem with dystopian books, a lot of YA dystopian books, is that authors have this thing where they have to find an excuse to make love forbidden, so they write a whole world around why two cis, able-bodied, white, heterosexual protagonists can't be together, and that's supposed to be really compelling because it's forbidden love, and I don't think that's interesting. I think that really annoys me how often that's done, but this was not that. It was finally about, like a reasonable explanation for why love would be forbidden. I loved their relationship. I really enjoyed all the side characters. There was sort of a lag in the middle, but I believe that is because this is originally split into multiple parts. So that's how I explained it. There was just like a bit of a lag between one climax and then building into a new storyline. But I super enjoyed this. I thought it was really well done, and I don't know. I just really, really enjoyed it. I will leave a link down below where you can go and purchase this book because you can't find it in bookstores. I'll link that down in the description below, but I definitely really enjoyed this and I gave it 4 stars. So the next book that I read was actually a short story, and that is Brokeback Mountain by Proulx. I borrowed this from a friend because I really wanted to read it. I have already seen the Brokeback Mountain movie, and I wanted to hear, I wanted to read the source material. So Brokeback Mountain, gay cowboys, that's the main thing. It starts in 1963, but spans decades of time, and it follows Ennis and Jack, and they meet as ranch hands, and they start to fall in love, and it's like the sad gay cowboy movie. Like, that's how you know Brokeback Mountain, but I adore Brokeback Mountain. I obviously see it as more than that. I don't think that this story had enough space to tell the story because, like I said, it spans decades of time, and look at it, it's 60 pages long. So by the time I got to the end and stuff was supposed to be really hitting me emotionally, it just didn't happen because I hadn't had enough time to get to know the characters. Even though I already knew them from the movie, the emotional impact and the breadth of the story wasn't there. So yeah, kind of disappointing for me. I thought it was well written. It still had like my 2 all-time favorite lines from the movie. I'm so glad that they were direct quotes because they're both fantastic. But yeah, I liked it. It just wasn't my favorite, and I think it needed a lot more space to tell the story. I wound up giving it like a 3-star. So the next book that I read was Falling Kingdoms by Morgan Rhodes. This is a YA high fantasy book. It follows many characters in this world. And at the very beginning, a Princess Cleo, goes to a market with a friend and someone who she's supposed to eventually marry, and at that market, things go very wrong, and her future husband kills a boy in the marketplace when they haggle over the price of wine, which sends everything into turmoil. Also, there is a search for something called the Kindred, which is a way to control elementia, which is a type of magic based on the elements. And there's a prophecy, and another person who is supposed to have a lot of magic and is like has a great destiny. There's so much going on. This was supposed to be like YA Game of Thrones. I think it felt like rip-off YA Game of Thrones, honestly. I mean, there are so many elements of this book that felt so directly taken from Game of Thrones that I kind of couldn't get over it. And I didn't like it. That's the main thing. I didn't think that the characters were very good. I hated Cleo. I hated her. I was just so frustrated because it was supposed to be in this world where she understands she's a princess, and she just kept saying stuff like, it's not fair, I don't understand why I can't just do this, and I hate that. There was more to it than that. I've heard that this book isn't the best in the series because in this first book, like, all the boys fall in love with Cleo, and that changes in the future, but no. The writing just wasn't there. The characters weren't strong enough. The world wasn't built well enough. I didn't like it. I spent most of my time, like, making fun of it while I was reading it. I wound up giving it about a 2.5 star. So the next thing that I read in November was Twilight, Life and Death. This is Twilight Retold by Stephenie Meyer. I don't have the dust jacket, so I'll just put it up here. So if you don't know, Twilight, Life and Death is a gender-swapped Twilight that Stephenie Meyer released last year, I think? Last year for the 10th anniversary of Twilight. Basically, she wanted to make a point that a lot of people complain about Bella Swan being a damsel in distress, and she wanted to make the argument that she's just a human in distress, so she rewrote the book where every single character's gender was swapped. So the main character is now a boy named Beau, and the love interest is now a girl named Edith. This had really great ideas behind it, but I don't think it was executed well enough because a lot of things were not a lot of things, but things were changed, and a lot of those did not actually help me to see that it could have been the same story, either gender. It felt like reinforcing certain gender stereotypes. The amount of time they spent talking about Beau's masculinity is a lot, but also I was reading more about other people's opinions of this book, and I was really struck by something. In the original Twilight, there are 2 mentions of sexual assault or attempted sexual assault. One of those is not till later in the series, but they talk about it in this book instead. And in both of these instances, those sexual assaults were changed to just physical assaults because the victims of each of these things was now a man. And that really made me question things. That's just, in general, if you can replace a sexual assault scene with just a physical assault, that means that the sexual assault was only there because the main character was female. And it's not great. There were some other things. I also didn't like Beau very much. Weirdly, I like Bella a lot more than Beau. And I came to like Edith, but initially I wasn't a huge fan of Edith. The main thing was that I didn't believe their love story. Totally didn't buy it, wasn't given nearly enough time, wasn't written nearly as strongly, weirdly enough. So by the time I got to the end, I was like, you don't love each other, you're just saying words. It doesn't seem like you love each other. So it was frustrating. It had some good ideas behind it, and some stuff was done well, and I enjoyed it, but I wound up giving this like 3 stars. It just was not done very well. So the last book that I read in November, I literally finished reading yesterday, just crammed it in, and that is Are You My Mother by Alison Bechdel. This is a graphic memoir. I have previously read her graphic memoir, Fun Home. There it is. There it is. I love Fun Home. I did not Love this. Fun Home is about Alison's relationship with her father. It's about her coming out as a lesbian, and then shortly after she comes out, her father commits suicide and she finds out that he was also gay. Actually, in this she says bisexual, so I'm not sure anymore. Anyway, I really loved it. I love the Broadway show. This was supposed to be about her relationship with her mother. It was not about her relationship with her mother. It was an Introduction to Psychology 101 class where Alison just talked about herself using really ridiculous terms from beginning to end. We spent way too much time with her seeing her various therapy sessions. Her mother didn't appear very often, and most of the time I felt completely lost in the jargon of her trying to explain her own head. It just felt very self-absorbed, and I know memoirs are about the self, and I really enjoy memoirs, but this was like another level of working out your own problems, and I don't really know why I would be interested in reading something quite this specific. I will say that it has her traditional art style that I really, really enjoy, and I thought that was really nice, but overall it was a big no for me. I gave it 2 stars. I actively disliked reading this book as I was reading it. Okay guys, there you go. Those are all of the books that I read in the month of November. If you read any of these, please let me know what your thoughts were about them down below, as well as letting me know maybe what was your favorite book that you read in the month of November. By the way, if you have not already voted in the BookTube YA Awards, please go do that. The link is down in the description below. The BookTube YA Awards is an event where you vote for your favorite 2016 YA releases. Plus, that means you can enter yourself in a bunch of giveaways. There are going to be live shows. But the important thing is that voting ends December 31st. So you are running low on time. So go check that link in the description. Go vote for your favorite YA releases of 2016. I will be judging the LGBTQIA+ category as well as graphic novels, in case you were curious, but go vote for that. Tell me what your favorite book was that you read in the month of November, and I will see you in another video very soon. Bye!